All right, we're good.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our fifth and final budget workshop. After we're done tonight, or at the conclusion, we will be hopefully adopting the budget. That's in fact our requirement by law, but we are going to have a session first. Likely only include a few things. We'll see what kind of questions come up. As always, if you have questions, of course, this format does not enable that, but please feel free to email either the superintendent or the board, and we will get back to you. I apologize. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so as we discussed a little bit of length on Tuesday night, of course, we are in a position now of adopting a budget without the usual information that we expect and certainly like to have. We don't really know what our state aid is going to be. We have the original projections, and but of course we are all expecting that at some point the governor may in fact reduce those amounts due to the loss of revenue suffered by the state as a result of the pandemic. But we are prepared, I think, to proceed without it. We really have no choice. Our philosophy, I think, going forward is going to be that we're going to set the budget, the expense side of the budget, where we have to, and we're kind of going to figure out the revenue side as we go along. So with that being said, I will turn the microphone over to Mrs. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Geller. So I'll start by addressing a question that had come up the other evening about class sizes. I did share with the board yesterday a comparison of this year versus next year's proposed numbers at the elementary level. For the most part, they are very similar. There will always be some anomalies based on our obligations to stay within contractual limits, but no one is exceeding or, approaching those limits at this point, and in fact by grade level are pretty much in the mid to low range in all of the grade levels. We did absorb the 2 elementary retirements this year, and we were able to capture them because our registration at Paul J. Ballou in kindergarten was a little bit lower than expected, and the declining enrollment at Beach Street in 6th grade. So that is where we absorbed those 2 sections. We were also able to absorb an art section at the elementary level, and at the secondary level, a special education, social studies, and science section. So we are in relatively good shape in that regard. At the secondary level, it's a little bit more difficult to project the class sizes at this time. We are still, the students are still in the process of enrolling for their courses, and once that is done, usually sometime by the end of this month, mid to late this month, our schedule wizard runs the schedules. That usually takes place sometime in mid to late June. And then once we get to as close to, at the high school level, 70–75% of the students' course schedules are completed, the schedules have to be addressed individually. And it is a very tedious process. Actually, I had shared with Mr. Geller one of my favorite tasks, but it's typically not completed until right before the August release of all the schedules. It really takes us right down to the end because we need to ensure that every single child has a full schedule, all of those periods are accounted for, and we need to balance the courses as much as possible. So we do run a lot of singletons. We have over 350 courses at the high school, many of which are singletons. But we also run many of our larger courses, those that most students are required to take, English 9, Global Social Studies 9, math and science courses. We have multiple sections. So the goal is, of course, to balance the sections as much as possible, and that's very much dependent on the actual schedule. So it's a long process. We don't have that hammered out in the same manner in which we can project where we are with our elementary sections, but it's a work in progress. So I didn't know if there were any other questions about the schedules in that regard. Okay, and then I guess Mrs. Pilati, perhaps you can do a recap for us of the entire budget.
Sure. Well, as we discussed on Tuesday night, the coronavirus pandemic has had a profound impact and will continue to have an impact on school budgets for years to come. So I think the important takeaways are that our tax levy increase is within our restricted limit. We are within the cap, and it is increasing 2.01% because of the coronavirus and without actually having any further guidance from New York State. We did take down our state aid, our projected foundation aid, by 10%, which for us is 2.4 million, so it's significant. We also took down other revenues that, such as interest income and other things were shifted either out of the budget and into this year or just removed from the budget. We are also looking to appropriate from reserves in 1.3 million if the need should arise next year and the state aid cuts are as significant as we are projecting. So with that being said, our final expenditure budget is actually looking at a decrease for next year of 1.19%. So we're looking at a budget to budget decrease of 1.19 and a tax levy increase of 2.01. But we are fortunate in our district where we have established a fiscal position that's fiscally sound, a financial position that's fiscally sound. And of course, when we plan for next year and the future years, we want to just ensure that the maintenance of that position. So what I think a lot of districts are doing, and really what no other choice to do, is to look to appropriate from reserves where necessary, and just know that in future years there are a lot of unknowns. The majority of our budget, which about 75%, is based on expenses for salary and benefits. There are some things, very little things, that we can control in our budget. Some of those big expenses that we can't control are health insurance rates, which are likely to go up in the future. ERS and TRS, we're definitely looking at an increase in TRS in the future. TRS is based off of a 5-year rolling average from the stock market. So it's important that even this year, when we have any excess funds this year and we appropriate those to reserves, we want to do so, excuse me, thoughtfully, to look to put that in reserves such as the ERS reserve or the TRS reserve, because we know we will have large expenses in the budget for future years. So as I said, we just want to make sure that we're mindful of this, and there's a lot of unknowns going forward, but I think we are in a good position financially to fund the budget if we have to with reserves for a few years. Did anyone have any questions on the budget?
So, do you have any update on when we might get some updated state aid information?
Unfortunately, no. They said possibly sometime this month.
Okay. And then, so the projections you have now, we got some state aid information. We were down about $1.5 million or so, and then you're projecting an additional decrease, and that's how you came up with the net number?
That's correct. So when the state aid runs came out in April, we were projected to decrease our state aid by, I think it was 5.63%. Mm-hmm. Not sure of the exact amount. But then because of we're trying to be proactive and anticipate the future reductions, we did take it down. In total, state aid is decreasing 11.8%. Right. Okay. So we did increase the reduction.
So if we needed to carry this for 3 years, we'd be talking about $5 million. Mm-hmm. Okay, obviously at some point, we're going to have to look to, just so that everybody's aware, we're going to have to look to get that money back, right? I mean, the idea is to rebuild the reserves at some point. Obviously, if the Massera sale goes through, that amount and the timing of it might actually work out quite well. So, yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. As I said the other night, dipping into reserves never really, makes me happy. Oh, by the way, I came to the 5 million number by backing out the $1 million a year that we use from fund balance each year, just so everybody's clear on my math. Anyway, going into reserves is something that can only last a finite period of time. So it's something that, always makes me nervous, but I recognize that, we have put ourselves in the position to be able to do it. And these are extraordinary circumstances. Okay, anyone else? Anybody have any questions?
So it was a challenge, but I really would like to compliment Mrs. Pilati. In her second year here in West Islip, has come up with some really innovative ideas and really protected what we are and what we're trying to do, and protected the program as much as possible. And really, I just wanted to thank her.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Yep, I second that.
That's it.
Mr. Pilati, I agree also, but I do have another question.
Sure.
In your projections, you're not counting any, or are you counting capital projects? Or standard,
When you say, am I counting it?
as part of our expenses going forward? Not this year, but over the next 3.
Well, we don't do many projects in our actual budget,
Right.
but what I did do when I did the projection, I did go back and look at the rest of the bonds, and I anticipated an increase in building aid because we do have phase 4B and phase 5 that are not including in the building aid projections yet. So again, it's hard to come up with an actual number because those projects haven't even been completed yet. But I did high level estimates of what I think those projected building aid amounts will be. So I think we will see an increase going forward in building aid because of the projects we're doing.
I was really wondering if there was going to be anything in those expenses that we'd be able to use the capital reserves for, but it sounds like there's nothing.
Yeah, there's very little that we do in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
But I agree with Mrs. Burns and everyone else. I think you did a great job. I particularly appreciate the projection going forward. It definitely helps clarify the situation.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're going to vote to adopt. All right, very good. Can I have a motion to adopt the 2020-2021 budget as discussed here tonight? Continuing your
moved.
backup.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We do have, Ms. Burns, can you just go through the dates upcoming if you have them available? You're muted.
You're on mute. I'm sorry, as you mentioned, Mr. Geller, at the beginning of the meeting, this was our final workshop, and now we do have an adopted budget. Our next step will be on Tuesday evening to conduct a budget hearing. I'm sorry, let me just pull up the time on that. I believe that is at 7:30, yes. I was going to see in the Beach Street Auditorium, but unfortunately it will be right here virtually. And that link is on the website. We are collaborating with the PTA Council to put together, hopefully put together an opportunity for us to speak again in a little more detail to our public about the budget. And I also know that the council is working to coordinate Meet the Candidate Night. Of course, it will be a little bit different than the format that we have run in the past, but that information is forthcoming. I don't believe a date has been scheduled for that just yet. And then, of course, our annual budget vote is on Tuesday, June 9th, which this year means that all absentee ballots, it is a vote conducted only by absentee ballot. All ballots must be returned to district office via mail or district office by 5 o'clock on June 9th, at which time we will begin to video stream the counting of the ballots from the Beach Street cafeteria.
So can people actually drop them off, or do they have to mail in?
They can drop them off at district office.
Okay.
One item of note, and I had mentioned it a little bit earlier, I actually got my ballot today for the primary election, which is also being conducted by absentee ballot. So I think it's important for us to remind people that they look for both ballots in the mail at this time, so as not to confuse one with the other, but people should just exercise their civic duty and vote all around. So.
Okay, very good. Well, thank everybody for joining us, and be safe and be well.
We
Good night.
salute all the veterans and those we
Absolutely.
lost.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
If you
those we
are,
lost. So.
absolutely. For those on our board, thank you for your service. I know that that is not what Memorial Day is about, and the veterans usually get mad when you thank them for on Memorial Day, but
We can't help ourselves.
we'll thank you anyway.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.